Good evening and a very warm welcome on behalf of Milim to this evening's presentation. Welcome wherever you are in the UK and indeed wherever you are in the world. Our series of online talks and conversations continues with our guest Craig Sherman. I'll introduce Craig in just a moment. A little bit of housekeeping first. Please do ask questions. You can do this by typing whatever you'd like to ask into the Q&A facility on your screen, and as ever we will try our best to get through as many of your questions as we can. Let me also draw your attention to the chat facility. This can be used to send a message to all of the other participants on this webinar should you wish to do so. And finally, we are recording this event. You will find it on our website at milim.org.uk in the next few days. There you will find recordings of other past events and also details of our future programme for which you can book tickets. And so to our guest this evening, Craig Sherman is a writer of fiction, non-fiction and poetry. His work has appeared in various publications, including Poetica magazine, which is a home for contemporary Jewish writing. Craig received an undergraduate degree in economics and finance from Temple University in Philadelphia, where he also worked at the literary magazine titled The Journal of Modern Literature. He went on to earn a master's degree in management information from St. Peter's University in New Jersey. Craig has also been a blogger for the Huffington Post and is a past host of the classic rock program Connections on WDDF Radio, which for the uninitiated is an internet radio station based in Philadelphia. As well as his creative pursuits, Craig has enjoyed a successful career in the technology industry for more than 3 decades. His first novel is this one, No Good Deed, which was published during the last year. Craig joins us from New Jersey, where he lives with his family. Craig, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I appreciate you and Alan and the whole Milim family for inviting me here and speaking today. Thank you. I'm excited.
Now, congratulations on publishing this novel. So tell me, Craig, did you always want to be a writer?
You know, I started in 3rd grade. I wasn't a great student. I had some learning disabilities and was not a great writer. But one day I was just inspired to write a story about something that I loved, which was the New York Mets, the team in New York, a baseball team. And I got big kudos for that little piece as a 2nd grader. And ever since then, it just kind of inspired me, and I love to write. And I've always, ever since then, wanted to be a writer. You know, life and, other things, pursuits, just kind of steered me in a different direction, but always did it on the side. And then just got in the last, I guess, 10, 15 years, got really inspired. And that's how I came to write this book.
So for those who haven't read it, and it is a really interesting read, what's it all about?
It's really about the story of, the protagonist, Dan Barkin, and Dan's last name Barkin actually comes from my mother's maiden name, Barkin. Like the wine, the kosher wine, but Dan Barkin, so he volunteers at his synagogue, and in time he's elevated to president. And he's really just a sort of doer. He doesn't look for leadership roles. He just wants to kind of do his little thing and be left alone. But then over time, he becomes elevated to president, and he's all nervous and anxious about taking on that role. And he soon discovers that all his insecurities is the least of his problems. And he finds all these illegal things going on, immoral things going on. And in his attempts to unearth all these things going on and bring out the truth of what's happening there, people in the congregation, in the leadership, start defaming him, and it all culminates into a place where he's accused of murder. And then I'm not going to give any more away, but it's, kind of a mystery, and just the struggle of him going through his leadership elevation from just somebody who wants to help out to leadership. So I think.
Now, you spoke just before about inspiration. Was there something particular that inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so again, I've always wanted to be a writer, but this subject came along because I had volunteered at my synagogue basically throughout my 40s. I had been on the board, and similar experience. Again, this is a fictional piece of work, but a lot of it is based on my experience. And my 10 years of volunteering at the synagogue, as well as volunteering in other capacities. I volunteered for a food bank. I volunteered for lots of different organizations, and I kind of see the same themes. And so I wanted to get into this book some of these things that all of us, I think, have experienced, whether you volunteer at your church or PTA, whatever it might be. We kind of experience a lot of the similar things. And you'll see too also how I came up with the title. I had a friend that at the time that I was going through a lot of struggles in the synagogue, and he was volunteering for a motorcycle club, right? The farthest thing from a synagogue. And he and I would discuss what was going on in our organizations. And it was just amazing, because here's somebody who's not Jewish, rides a motorcycle, has that organization, and we were experiencing similar things. And I just thought that it would be a good story to tell for people that have volunteered for different organizations, and we all go through a lot of the same struggles. And that's really what inspired me, is that conversation with my friend.
How long did it take you to write the book? And if I'm right, you had to balance writing this with your day job.
Correct. Yeah, so I've probably been writing it. It's probably about 10 years, ever since I finished my role as president in my synagogue. I started writing it. When I first wrote it, wasn't confident about my writing. I wasn't happy with the results. I kind of put it up on the shelf, took some classes, started doing other writing to kind of improve my skills. And then when COVID hit in 2020, I decided at the end of 2020 that while we're stuck in the house and dealing with this is the time I'm going to finish this book. And I just sat down, and every night after work, no matter if I wanted to or not, I forced myself to just write it, and spent a year. So I would say it took, 10 years plus really 1 year of full, really just engrossment in it. So it took a long time.
Now, there's a disclaimer at the front of the book, as there is in common with many books, and it says the names, characters, businesses, events, and incidents in this book are the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead is purely coincidental. This book is about a man who becomes president of his synagogue. You just told us that you became president of your synagogue. So how true is this statement I just read out? Is there something autobiographical about the character of Dan Barkan?
Well, I think Dan Barkan is definitely, out of all the characters, probably most resembles a real life person, and that's me. So there's a lot of Dan in me. There's, of course, and that's one of the reasons I chose to do fiction, is because I wanted to expand on that. I wanted to be some of the characters that I might have seen along my way in my volunteering experiences. So there might be aspects of Dan that might be somebody else that I was thinking of. And certainly all the other characters, while they're remnants of people that I knew, they're really combinations of people that I knew. And some is just purely my imagination and somebody that I imagine. But there's a lot of truth and a lot of fiction in it. And the only one who really knows that is me, my wife, my editor, and anybody who wants to ask me. I have nothing to hide. I'm more than happy to tell anybody if they're like, did that really happen? Some things did, some things didn't. So
I think it's an interesting thing, certainly with other authors where I know something of their lives. They also have this disclaimer, and they also write things which are incredibly close to the truth, if not the actual truth. So I think it's probably a common trait.
Right. And, if you think about it, right, what I remember and what I imagine and what I think happened in my perspective might really be, a variation on what really happened. So, who knows what the truth is.
Now, Dan's father in the book, he refers to the synagogue as John Bull, which
Yes.
those of us in this fair city will recognize as a sort of rhyming slang, northern rhyming slang for shul. And you describe this as a remnant of his days growing up as a child in the north of England. Do you have such connections?
I do, actually. My dad was born in Leeds in 1928. And so growing up, I was surrounded by obviously my dad, but also my aunt and my uncle and other relatives. And that was very commonplace that we use terms, using the rhyming slang, and especially John Bull, like we'd go off to John Bull, or let's see what else. My dad was a tailor. He grew up in Leeds, and that's where he
I
learned
think
his
we have
trade.
some slides of
Yes,
let's look at these slides, and then you can
sure.
talk us through them. So he was a tailor.
Yeah, he was a tailor. And you can see there that the bottom is him and his parents in front of their house. My father, Harvey Sherman, and that's his mother, Fanny, and Simon Sherman. And so he grew up here, and especially my dad owned a clothing store and was a tailor here. So a lot of the terminology here, he'd your whistle and flute, your suit, right? So a lot of things he would use that rhyming slang, as well as all my relatives that were here, and it was really a big part of my life. But as you could see up there, Alan Benstock, who took me on a little tour of Leeds when I was there. He took me over to see exactly where my dad learned his trade at 14 years old, Jackson and Baskwell, really on 21 King Street. And that was amazing to go see kind of where my roots, where they came from. And then you also see up there a picture of the Judean Club, which is where he spent a lot of his time socializing with friends. And so it was really a special trip for me when I went there to see my dad, but that's where my connection is. And I still to this day have family in Leeds, and in other parts of England. And it has a really important connection to me, even though this year was my first year that I was able to get out there. And I hope to go next year as well and come to Leeds again.
So let's look at the next slide. It talks about your father's journey to America.
Yeah, so my dad came in 1950 and to the United States from Leeds. He came to stay with his uncle who had a chicken farm, his uncle Avram, in Farmingdale, New Jersey, which was just tons of Jewish egg farmers, chicken farmers. And he came to Ellis Island in 1950, and he always talked about how he saw Salvador Dali, up on the ship with him, painting up on the deck. And he had all these images of what it would be like as a young man, really. He was, 20, I think, 20 when he came here. And that's a picture of him up on the top left with his sister and his sister's husband, my uncle Ivor. He's the one on with his hand in his pocket. And he would talk about how he came to the United States, imagining that the streets were paved with gold, and how excited he was to come here and to build a life. There's also a picture here you can see of my mom and my dad, and my mom's online here tonight. She's 91. My dad passed away, unfortunately, in 2017, but you could see that's from their wedding day. And they met in Asbury Park, New Jersey, not far from where I am right now, in a hotel on a Yom Kippur dance. Asbury Park, for some of you who may have heard of Asbury Park, is well known as kind of the place where Bruce Springsteen, our native son, really made his name. But it's a beautiful town now, and that's where they met. And my dad came here. He opened a clothing store in Lakewood. And that's how he raised his family. And he had 4 boys. And you could see in the bottom left, that's a picture of me and my brothers. I'm a twin, so we're the little babies. That's me on the right, and my twin brother Randy. And then there's my eldest brother Barry, and my other brother Mark. So he, came here like many immigrants, from Europe, and looked to kind of find his fortune here, opened a clothing store, and sent all 4 boys to private school and to college. And it was, it was really something out of, I think, the books, the stories, the movies of people immigrating to the United States.
Tell us something about your visit to Leeds. How was that for you?
So my wife works for a pharmaceutical company in London, and she had an opportunity to go, and she was going to go fly out to London. And I'm like, there's no way you're going without me. I'm going. I got to see Leeds. I want to see my family that I've never met. And it was an amazing experience. Many talk about how you go as Jews for the first time to Israel and you have this sort of connection with Israel. And I did that not long ago. And I certainly felt that connection when I went to Israel. But there was something different about going to Leeds. I felt even a deeper connection than even with Israel. It was like coming home and to meet my cousins. You could see Robert, Louise, and Georgina, and there were other relatives that I met, and we just had an amazing time there. And I got to see all of these places that my dad mentioned as a kid that he spent his time in, Roundy Park and Gaythorne Terrace and where he lived. And I got to see the street he lived on. And it was just a remarkable experience going and visiting Leeds. And I look forward to coming back with my twin brother in the summer. I also did take some time. I went through London and saw some great things there, and took a day in Liverpool. My twin brother and I grew up very big Beatle fans, and so it was a great experience for me to go for the day and take a train out there and see all the wonderful sights there. So it was an amazing experience, and I can't wait to come back.
So tell us something about where you live now.
So I live in a place called Jackson, New Jersey. We're about 20 minutes from the shore, from the Jersey Shore, not far from Asbury Park, which is right on the shore that I mentioned earlier. And it's got a very large Jewish community next door in Lakewood, New Jersey. Some may have heard of Lakewood. I actually grew up in Lakewood. That's the town that my dad actually, when he settled after he left the farm and built his clothing store, he built a business in Lakewood as a tailor and a clothier. And when I grew up there, had a small little sect, I guess I would call it, of Orthodox Jews. They had a very big yeshiva there, and over time and over the years, it has grown where the entire population of Lakewood is 2/3 Orthodox. It's pretty an amazing experience. Yeah, it definitely rivals in comparison to what you might see in Jerusalem in the old city.
I think we have a slide of this. Maybe Alan can share it, and we'll have a look. That's quite a remarkable proportion of Jews to live in a place.
Yeah, and it's not even just Jews; it's Orthodox Jews too. So, yeah. I mean, you go on a Shabbat and there's nobody on the road, and so you could see. You just walk down the streets and there's tons of Orthodox. That synagogue that you see is actually the synagogue that I was bar mitzvahed in and grew up in, that my family joined. We were actually in, and I talk a little bit about it in the book with the character Dan. We actually, there was a strip that had Reform synagogue, a conservative synagogue, and then up at the top of the hill was this synagogue, the Orthodox synagogue. And at one point, our family belonged to all three. We started at the Reform. This was before I can even remember as an infant, and my parents, wanted to have more of a traditional experience than what they had in the Reform. They moved to that, and then my twin brother and I, when we were older, when we got to, I guess it was about 5th or 6th grade, joined the Hebrew day school. Because the local public schools were really struggling. And so my parents put us into the local day school. And because it was Orthodox, the day school, and it was connected with this synagogue, we then joined that synagogue. And so we kind of ran the gamut in Lakewood. And, not a lot of towns can really offer up conservative, Reform, Orthodox. And there's also tons now, especially Black Hat Orthodox, ultra Orthodox synagogues. This was more of a modern Orthodox synagogue at the time. And so it's an experience for anybody that comes to see this town. I don't live in it. I live in the town next door, but it was an experience growing up. And I moved here in this town, Jackson, where I live, about 5 years ago. My family had lived in the Princeton area, but moved 5 years ago to here. And it's an experience for me. I was only about a half an hour, 40 minutes away from where I grew up, but being back home and being near Lakewood and seeing all the things and the places that I grew up with, it's a wonderful experience. And to share that with my family, my boys, my wife, and to, show them the places where I was as a kid, where I grew up.
Now, tell us a little bit about the process of writing this book. Was it one of these books which is all planned out from the start, or did the story emerge and come alive as you were writing it?
Yeah, so I had written a short story that got published that was called The Truth, and it was sort of kind of the last chapter or the second to last chapter in this book. I've changed it a lot, but that was sort of something that I started with the premise that this would be the ending of my book. But really what I did was I just started writing. And I didn't really plan it out. I didn't really think about it. I just had in my back of my head that ending. But I really just started writing. And as I kept going along, it kind of just came out of, I never had an issue with writer's block. It just flowed perfectly. Now, there were times that I might have gone back and said, oh, I want to put this in because I know now that this is going to happen in a later chapter. But for the most part, I didn't really storyboard. I didn't lay it out. It just naturally flowed out of me. It was an amazing experience for anybody who's tried to write, to experience really no writer's block. I felt very fortunate.
Remarkable. Now, let's talk about some of these characters you've created. The character of Jackie, she's one of the interesting characters, and she's described on the blurb as a wealthy and gregarious hippie and the synagogue's benefactor. How did you come up with the idea for her, and does she have a particular role in the book?
Yeah, so I think one of the themes, and I guess we'll talk about this too, one of the themes that I wanted to sort of express and things that I've learned over the years is that things don't always appear what they seem like, right? That just because you think somebody's this way, that's not really who they are until you really get to know them very well. And that's kind of the role of what I wanted out of Jackie. I think a lot of people sort of got this impression that Jackie might be the enemy in the beginning. And eventually she evolves and you realize she's really a friend and really a confidant and a helper of Dan. And she was actually, out of a lot of the characters, far removed from anybody that I knew. And she had remnants of lots of different people that I may have known, but really, she really came out of my head as I wanted somebody, that just was there for Dan, but you didn't think so in the beginning and you weren't sure what to think of her. And to realize that in a lot of cases, people aren't always exactly what they appear to be until you really get, to know them.
Now, we have a scene where Dan opens up to Jackie and tells Jackie how he met his wife. Quite an interesting story. And I wondered what had inspired that and whether there was any particular message you were seeking to convey through that episode.
Again, I think there's elements of things don't always appear as they are, but that was definitely inspired by true stories that, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And that actually, most of those events all did actually happen. That's how I met my wife, who I'm married to this day, happily. And it was something that I wanted to always put in. I thought it would make a great story, and I always wanted to put it in a book. And so I kind of figured out how I could, sort of get it into this book, because I just think it's a great story. And that was really my goal with it.
So is the shul in the book based on a real building, on a real place?
Yeah, it's based on a lot of buildings in a lot of places. Again, we belonged to three synagogues growing up, and I've since belonged to a couple of different synagogues. And so it's kind of a culmination of a lot of the synagogues I was brought up in. But, I spent 17 years at the synagogue that I was president of, Bethel, and have lots of very challenging and difficult memories, but at the same time, some amazing and wonderful memories. some great people that I met there that have been supportive and wonderful that I still speak to this day. And so I did certainly, that played a very strong and large role in it, but I wouldn't say it's exactly that synagogue, but
I think we
definitely
have
my
some pictures.
inspiration.
Maybe Alan can share the slide and we can have a look.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
where is this?
This is in a town called East Windsor, New Jersey, which is about 15 minutes, 20 minutes from where I live. Since we've moved away from that synagogue, as it's a little far, but this is not far. This is kind of the synagogue sort of I was thinking of, at least the building in some ways. But again, it's really a culmination of lots of different synagogues. But I spent a good portion of my time there. I have some of my best friends that were from there, and some amazing experience. And you could see some of the things that I talk about on this slide. I ran their technology. I was in part of the men's club. I read Torah there, a lot of different things. And 10 years of my life was spent there, and it's very special to me. And so I think about that place, and that was certainly in my thoughts when I wrote the book.
Now, there's a dynamic between character Dan as president and his wife. I'm not sure his wife is all that keen on him doing the job. Tell me how was your relationship with your wife when you were president of the shul?
I think it was very similar. But I wouldn't say she wasn't really keen on me doing it. I think she wasn't keen on me being stressing myself out and beating myself up, and all the insecurities that came along with that. She was extremely supportive. She was always there for me. Her focus was that she wanted me to do what made me happy and what was best for me and our family. Not so much that she didn't or did not want me to do the presidential role. She knew and felt and was one of my biggest supporters, and gave me the confidence that helped me really accomplish a lot when I was there. So, kudos to her, and I'm thankful for her every day.
Now, just a reminder to our audience, if you do have some questions for Craig, pop them in the Q&A. And I'm sure Craig will answer them in due course. Now, let's talk a bit about the rabbi in the book. Without giving anything away, he's not quite as virtuous as he seems. Is this your experience of the men of the cloth, or is it your imagination again?
No, I think it's my experience with some men of the cloth. I think it's my experience with some leadership in lots of things, whether we look at politics, whether you think about your time and wherever you may work, whatever, we're all human beings, and we're all have very positive attributes, which I did try to show some of the positive attributes of the rabbi. Even though he's the villain in the story, there were some positive attributes to him, and there were also negative. And I think that was sort of an awakening for me. Even when I went through the presidency, as well as other places where these people that are sort of elevated at these high levels, whether it's your clergy or somebody in politics, you realize over time they're all human beings, right? So they're flawed just like we are. And so I think that's been my experience, even myself as president, or even one of the things I tried to do is even the character Dan, he's our hero in the story, and he does lots of positive things, but he's also does a little bit of insecurities, and a lot of he's not a perfect character. None of us are. And I think that's kind of the thing that I have learned over my years of volunteering and even just in life.
I mean, Dan writes a monthly article for the shul. Apparently you also did a similar thing when you were president. How have you put distance between the character and yourself, or actually is there no distance between the two?
In other words, like, am I different? Are you asking me if I'm different than Dan? Yeah. I mean, Dan is kind of me, but a made up version of me. So there is distance between me and Dan. I'm not exactly like him. I'm lots of remnants of me is in that. And, but I did write the monthly article, and it was a big deal for me because I love to write. and I hadn't written in a while. So it kind of all culminated at the time that I was writing the article for the synagogue. At the same time, I was volunteering for a organization at the company that I work for, Bank of America, in their mindfulness group. So we were doing mindfulness exercises with the community, including meditations once a week. And so we had presentations from outside individuals, and we had a speaker come. And I wrote an article just in our internal magazine on this speaker, and she read the article, loved it, passed it on to Ariana Huffington, and that's how I got my gig at the Huffington Post. And so at that time, that's really when, between that and my writing the articles as president of the synagogue, I started really getting back to what I loved doing, which was writing. And so I think for me, there's lots of similarities between me and Dan, and there are some things that are not exactly the same, but that writing piece of it was me.
What sort of things were you writing for the Huffington Post about?
So all sorts of things. I anywhere from sports. I wrote some articles on baseball. I wrote some articles on mindfulness and some of the things that I was experiencing at the time, and some meditation. Just things, the politics that were going on in the world at the time. It was I had full reign to write really whatever I wanted to talk about, and so whatever that month happened to just inspire me, that's what I would write about.
The finale of the book involves a mobile phone recording which happens by accident. And I just wonder how believable this is supposed to be. The book as a whole is very credible and very believable, but this particular scene for me, I just wondered whether you recognized it was perhaps a little bit of a stretch, or are we just supposed to take it as gospel?
Yeah, I think you're supposed to take it as gospel, as that really did happen. It is a stretch, but I will tell you, and again, I go back to that quote, truth is stranger than fiction. It happened to me all the time, and that's where I came up with it. It didn't happen in the exact way that the story did, obviously, but I had a phone that I was having issues with, and it would always record my conversations that I'm having with somebody. And I was really concerned that I would get me in trouble or something, or I'd have evidence. I always thought, what happens if something happens? And I didn't realize it was recording it. So this was actually really happening to me, even though it sounds like a stretch. Again, truth is stranger than fiction, right?
Now we have Brian Gold, one of our viewers, has asked a question. He says the book is closely related to your personal experiences. Do you have another book in you? And if so, would it be a similar story, or do you think you could have a complete change of direction?
I do think that I have at least another book in me. I always, when I introduce my book, I like to say to people, this is my first novel. Because I'm hoping that there will be a second, maybe third, who knows. I think my editor said that he would love for me to write another book with the same characters, perhaps though a different venue. And I've been thinking about it, and I've had some notes, and I could see definitely something coming out of that. I think I will keep the same characters and maybe what happens after all this, but not necessarily in a synagogue setting.
You talk about your editor. Tell us a little bit about this. How does the process of editing influence or change the book?
Yeah, so my editor, who was phenomenal, he would read my chapters and just basically provide me with editorial type of things, like grammar and maybe cutting things down. I kind of am a little bit of a verbose writer sometimes, and so he helped me to streamline that. There were occasions where he would suggest things like, well, maybe this doesn't fit, or this is incongruous of maybe something I said earlier, which is really, really helpful to catch things like that. And then I would just rewrite the chapter, send it back to him, and we'd go back and forth until we both felt it was perfect. I also have to throw out a kudos to my wife, because she, who is a voracious reader, loves to read, and she spent a lot of time editing this even before I got it to my editor. So in a lot of cases, she would read it, we'd go through it, and then it would go to my editor. He would then read it and send it back. And so it was almost like I really had two editors for the price of one. And it's great work. I really loved, especially my editor. We had a connection and we worked really well together. And it was almost as fun as the process of writing. Believe it or not.
How did you find him?
I took a class at Princeton. It was like an adult class on creative writing, and it was on memoir writing. And he and I just connected and kicked it off. And I never thought much of it, but a couple of years later, when COVID hit and I was going to really finish the book, I reached out to him and said, "Hey, do you know of any editors that could help me finish this?" And he said, "Well, it happened to be me. I could do it." And so we've been good friends ever since. And we worked together, and I got to tell you, it was an amazing experience. I thought you never know. You work with somebody, and they change things, your baby, your book, and you might take it personally or get upset by it. It was so far from that. It was just really great.
Now I want to have a chat with you about the title of the book and the cover. I think we've got a couple of slides. Just showing the cover, if we can bring those up. So how did the title come about?
So there's actually a chapter in the book where I talk about this, and I think I mention it. Well, first of all, the cover artwork, I'll tell you that since you got that up first. Okay. So on the left-hand side, that's a painting that was drawn by my mother-in-law, Elaine Milstein Ifker. She is an artist. She went to art school in Philadelphia, and I told her about the book and asked her if she could design maybe a cover for me. Showed her some pictures of the current synagogue that I belong to and other different things, some themes of the book. And she drew this beautiful, beautiful painting, and hangs in my house to this day. Actually, you could see it probably over my shoulder. Also, that combined with, if you see at the bottom right, is an album. Jackson Browne, for those of you who don't know him, Jackson Browne is an artist, kind of folk rock scene out of California from the 70s. And this is my favorite album of all time. It's called Late for the Sky. And I always loved this cover, the play of dark and the play of the light in the sky, and just saw that kind of right and wrong, black and white, as a really great theme. And then realized, actually, as a big fan of art, I loved Rene Magritte, who is the artist that drew the painting above the album, and realized that Jackson Browne took a Rene Magritte painting and made his album he wanted something based on that. So I thought, when I do my album cover, I'm like, I want something that will take the elements of Jackson Browne, which, again, my favorite artist, love his lyrics, his music, and the painter Rene Magritte, and combine it. And that's sort of how we came up with that cover. And then elements of what my mother-in-law had drawn.
And your mother-in-law's picture, I'm looking at it now. The Rabbi's parking sign is very neat and pristine, and the president's one is falling over. Is there a message there?
Yeah, well, I think there's the message that, at least in the story, you see how, Dan's not treated as well as he would like to, and then the rabbi's kind of viewed as the ruler, the god in the synagogue. And also, I don't know if you have it on one of your slides, but, and again, not necessarily related, but I did see at my synagogue that the rabbi's sign was like perfectly standing still. I saw it one day and said, wow, this would be a great cover to see that juxtaposition of the rabbi's sign standing tall and straight and the president's sign kind of all off kiltered. And, so that was something that I really did see and thought, wow, what a great cover this would be for that battle between the rabbi and Dan Barkin.
Interesting. At our shul, the president doesn't have a parking space.
So I guess I consider myself lucky for having it.
Now, sorry, you were going to talk about the title a little bit.
Yeah. So the title. So again, I have a friend. I think there's a picture too there of my friend Lou, who actually plays a role in one chapter. And Lou and I think I talked about earlier, would always have these discussions about what was going on in his motorcycle club as a person on the board of the motorcycle club and what was happening in my synagogue. And it was always amazing to me. And there's Lou, that you just see, you know, to the right, you see me with my tallis on, and you see Lou, the non-Jew, in his motorcycle, right? You can't, you know, two other ends of the spectrum. And we had so much in common, going through the strains and stresses that we were having. And he would be the one that would always say to me, no good deed would go unpunished. You know, this concept, you know, based on the Thomas Aquinas quote, you know, that basically you do good, you know, you're rewarded. You do bad, you don't. And life isn't always like that, right? And so Lou would always, you know, every time we'd shake our head about something that went on in our respective organizations, he'd always say, no good deed goes unpunished. And I wanted, though, the book for people to walk away, as well as I still have walked away from my years of volunteering, wondering, is it no good deed goes unpunished or no good deed goes unrewarded? And really, I think it's a combination of both. You know, all of us, you know, have experienced tough times whenever we've done something for somebody, but we've also great reward. And that was something I wanted in the book, which is why I left the title as No Good Deed, ... You know, you as the reader decide, you know, was it punished or rewarded, you know? And that's how I came up with the title.
Interesting. Now we have a question from Yvonne Cheney. Yvonne is in Southern California. She's one of our regular viewers, and Yvonne is interested to know if you promote your book through Jewish book festivals, and points out that the Jewish Federation of San Gabriel Valley, Southern California, has an annual book festival. Is that something you've done or you're considering to do?
I have done similar things. I'd like to know more about that. If you could send it to me, Yvonne, I would love to maybe put my book in for that. I just recently applied for the National Jewish Book Awards, and I'm waiting to hear on that as a new author, as well as fiction. And so, yeah, I'm trying to promote it wherever I can. So if Yvonne or anybody has any suggestions on where I might do that, that would be great.
Now, the book covers some quite tricky issues. There are quite a number of themes that are covered, but particularly ones which stand out: people with non-Jewish partners and whether they can sit on the synagogue board, the issue of gay marriage. Does this book have a serious message or messages?
Yeah, I think it does. I think one of the things I wanted to get across were all those weighty issues that I think, and it's not even just Judaism, I think it's a lot of religions that are dealing with, is how to live in a modern world and stick to our traditions and our beliefs. You know, that issue was pressing, I think, to a lot of people in the Jewish world today about, you know, intermarriage and, you know, wanting to be open and welcoming and experiencing lots of different cultures, but at the same time keep hold of our faith. And so and then also, you know, interfaith, LGBTQ community, and how do we welcome them in when, you know, you read things in the Torah that explicitly says that we're against it, but how do you then embrace it without turning everybody off? So I really wanted to put a lot of those issues that I dealt with over the years, whether it's in my family and personal life, as well as president of a synagogue, for people to think about. I wasn't necessarily looking to give an answer, what's right, what's wrong, but for people to think about it. And the most important thing I really wanted to accomplish as president of my synagogue, as well as to get across in this book, is that we have to be welcoming, right? We can't just exclude people. You know, there's levels of observance in our religion. You know, there are some people that don't keep kosher, right? So we don't exclude them and say they can't come to synagogue. We don't want to do that too for other areas, whether somebody's, you know, lesbian or gay, or whether they're married to somebody who's not from our faith. You know, I think the important thing is we're all supposed to be a community and we have to be welcoming. And that's really the spirit of religion, not exclusion. So I really wanted some of those heavy themes to shine through in the book.
And they do, and it's a powerful message. So tell me, what relevance does this book have for a non-Jewish audience?
Yeah, I think they can connect, and I didn't want to lose track of the Jewishness of it. You could see it's heavily with Jewish themes. I put a glossary in the back for those that may not know all the terminology. And I didn't want to dilute it just to make it kind of available to anybody. But at the same time, I really again, this my experience with my friend Lou and the motorcycle club really told me that all of us are experiencing. I mean, from a religious standpoint, I think all religions are having struggle keeping in this modern world people active in their communities. But also, the same themes pop up whether you know volunteer for your PTA in your local school or like Little League or whatever it might be. There's common themes when you're dealing with human beings, with people. We're all flawed, and that's the stuff that I wanted to make sure. You know, one of the things I remember having the discussion with the rabbi when I first became president. He was, "What are some of your ideas on how we can maybe relieve some of the angst that goes on with members?" I said, "The only way we're getting rid of that is we get rid of all the people. If there's no people, there's no conflicts. There's no." And that's just the reality of us as human beings and being in a community, and we have to deal with it head on.
How has the novel been received? It's quite a few months now since it came out. Have you had some good reviews? Have you had good
Yeah, I
feedback?
mean, you could go on to Amazon. I've gotten lots of wonderful reviews. People have, you know, and even, you know, this is a question that I often get asked. What about people that you were at the synagogue with? How do they feel about it, right? And I've gotten some amazing reviews and some positive feedback from them on they felt kind of connected and related to some of the experiences that they've seen in the book. Because while some of the stories and things are not necessarily fiction or not necessarily truthful, and they're fiction, there's a theme there. There's experiences that we've all had that anybody who's volunteered or given her their time have experienced.
And anything negative? Does anybody feel you've betrayed their confidence or?
I have not been told that,
Okay.
nor have I heard through the grapevine that that's been the case. But I am sure there is somebody out there that feels that way. But I, you know, and I'll take this opportunity. That certainly was not my intention. It was to really relay the experiences that I have and all of us as flawed human beings, and what we go through. Certainly, there was never any intention to degrade or you know, criticize anybody. You know, we're all humans.
Well, it's been fascinating to chat to you about this book. This is No Good Deed by Craig Sherman. If you want to buy a copy of this, there's a link on our website. There will be a link on the follow-up email you'll get tomorrow. It's a really interesting and entertaining read, and
Thank you
probably
very
not
much.
recommended for anybody who's about to become president of a shul, but
Yeah,
otherwise,
wait till after.
wait till after, definitely. Um,
Absolutely. And by the way, just a quick shout out to my editor. I didn't mention his name. His name's Rod Richards. So I just want to make sure I get that across.
Fantastic. So anybody looking for an editor, he's your man. And if you
He
buy the
is your
book
man.
through Millim, we'll earn a few pennies, which will help us support this program, and it won't cost you any more. And to say thank you to you, Craig, I'm going to send you some of my photographs. This is Magen David Adom, the Israeli ambulance service in action in Israel. So hopefully you'll enjoy
Thank you.
that.
And
Pleasure.
congratulations on your accomplishment. If you want to tell everyone you just get
Well,
received the
I am a
reward.
winner of the British Portrait Awards 2023, so it's very kind of you to mention that. So you are now getting a book from an award-winning photographer, which
That's right.
wasn't when I published it, but hopefully you'll enjoy that. Now, a few words before we go about our forthcoming program. So next week, on the 23rd of January, we have the historian and author of Britain's Jews and the First World War, Paula Kitching. She's returning to Millim to speak about the centenary of the British Jewry Book of Honour, which is a remarkable publication, and there are a few copies of this in our community here, so that should be very interesting. Then on the 30th of January, I will be discussing the journalist and novelist Joseph Roth with Kieran Pym. He's author of a new biography called Endless Flight, a remarkable, complex character, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking to him. Then on the 6th of February, we have Brian Chayette. He is the chair in modern literature and culture at the University of Reading. He'll be speaking about his book, The Ghetto, a very short introduction. We have much more coming up. So please do visit milim.org.uk, sign up to our newsletter, and that way you won't miss anything. All these events are free, but if you wish to make a small donation, it will help us. There's a link coming up in the chat now, or there will be also a link on our website. You can find one there. It remains for me to thank our guest, Craig Sherman, once again. Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate the time.
And looking forward to seeing you all again as a future event. Until then, stay safe. See you soon.
Bye-bye.